He was Hollywood's most debonair leading man, the epitome of sophistication and charm. Cary Grant's name became synonymous with elegance, wit, and timeless appeal. For over 3 decades, he graced the silver screen in classics like North by Northwest, an affair to remember. But behind the suave exterior and that unmistakable transatlantic accent was a man haunted by abandonment, desperate for connection, and obsessed with one thing above all else, being the father he never had. Cary Grant had one child, a daughter born when he was already 62 years old. Jennifer Grant represented everything he'd ever wanted: a chance at redemption, a legacy beyond the movies, and most importantly, someone who would love him unconditionally. But what happened to Jennifer Grant? The daughter of one of Hollywood's biggest stars seemed to vanish from public view, living a life shrouded in mystery and protected by one of the most secretive men in show business today. We're uncovering the remarkable story of Jennifer Grant, a story of privilege and pressure, love and loss, and the complex relationship between a Hollywood legend and the daughter who became his greatest achievement and his deepest vulnerability. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. World. To understand Jennifer Grant's story, we first need to understand the man who shaped her life, Archibald Alexander Leach, better known to the world as Cary Grant. Born in Bristol, England in 19... Archie Leach experienced the kind of childhood trauma that would drive him to spend his entire life reinventing himself. When he was 9 years old, his father told him his mother had died. It was a lie. Elsie Leach had actually been committed to a mental institution by her husband. But young Archie wouldn't learn the truth for over 20 years. This betrayal, the ultimate abandonment by both parents, would define every relationship Cary Grant ever had. At 14, Archie ran away to join a traveling acrobatic troupe, eventually making his way to America in 1920. He was desperate to escape his past, to become someone entirely new, and in Hollywood, he found the perfect place to do it. When Paramount Pictures offered him a contract in 1932, Archie Leach died and Cary Grant was born. The name itself was carefully chosen, sophisticated, American, memorable. But changing his name couldn't change his deepest fear, that everyone he loved would eventually abandon him for 3 decades. Cary Grant projected an image of effortless charm and confidence. He was every woman's ideal man and every man's aspiration. But privately, he struggled with depression, insecurity, and a desperate need for approval. His romantic life was a series of failed relationships, 5 marriages, countless affairs, and a pattern of running away whenever things got too serious. Virginia Cherrill, Barbara Hutton, Betsy Drake, Diane Cannon, each relationship ended the same way, with Cary convinced that he was fundamentally unlovable. But everything changed in 1966 when he met a young actress named Diane Cannon. For the first time in his life, Cary Grant was willing to risk everything: his career, his carefully crafted image, even his deepest fears for love. Diane Cannon was 27 years old when she met 62-year-old Cary Grant on the set of a screen test in 1965. Was a struggling actress from the Pacific Northwest. He was Hollywood royalty at the peak of his fame and fortune. Their courtship was intense and unconventional. Cary pursued Diane with the same methodical precision he brought to his performances, showering her with gifts, attention, and promises of a life beyond her wildest dreams. They married in July 1965 in a private ceremony in Las Vegas. For Cary, this wasn't just another marriage, it was his chance at redemption, his opportunity to create the family he'd never had. But what made this relationship different was Cary's confession to Diane about his deepest desire. At 61 years old, he told her he wanted children more than anything in the world. He wanted to be the father he'd never had, to give a child the love and stability that had been denied to him. The challenge was obvious. Cary was already in his 60s, an age when most men were becoming grandfathers, not first-time fathers. But he was determined, consulting with doctors, maintaining his health obsessively, and preparing for fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to his film roles. When Diane became pregnant in 1965, the Hollywood press went wild. Headlines screamed about the miracle baby and the oldest first-time father in Hollywood. But for Cary, this wasn't a publicity stunt. It was the fulfillment of his deepest dream. As the pregnancy progressed, Cary became obsessively protective. He hired the best doctors, insisted on the finest medical care, and prepared for fatherhood with an intensity that sometimes frightened those around him. On February 26, 1966, Jennifer Grant was born at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. At 62 years old, Cary Grant finally became a father, and his life would never be the same. The birth of Jennifer Grant transformed Cary in ways that shocked everyone who knew him. The man who had spent decades running from commitment suddenly became the most devoted father in Hollywood. He retired from acting almost immediately after Jennifer's birth, turning down millions of dollars in film offers to focus entirely on fatherhood. This was unprecedented. Cary Grant was at the height of his earning power, but nothing mattered more than being present for his daughter. Cary approached fatherhood with the same perfectionism he brought to his film career. He read every parenting book, consulted with child psychologists, and created detailed schedules for Jennifer's care. He even learned to change diapers, something virtually unheard of for men of his generation and social status. But friends began to notice something troubling about Cary's devotion to Jennifer. His love bordered on obsession. He couldn't bear to be separated from her, even for short periods. He hired round-the-clock security, not just for protection, but to monitor everyone who came into contact with his daughter. Former household staff later revealed that Cary had installed hidden cameras throughout the house to watch Jennifer even when he wasn't in the room. He kept detailed journals of her every word, every developmental milestone, every interaction with others. This obsessive attention began to strain his marriage to Diane. She felt suffocated by Cary's need to control every aspect of Jennifer's life, and increasingly isolated from her own daughter. Cary saw threats everywhere. He didn't trust babysitters, relatives, even Diane's own family. Concerned friends convinced Cary to see a therapist, where he revealed the depth of his fears about losing Jennifer. He was convinced that everyone would abandon him eventually, just as his parents had. His solution was to control every variable, to make abandonment impossible. By 1968, the marriage was over, but the divorce would trigger a custody battle that would dominate Jennifer's childhood and reveal just how far Cary Grant would go to keep his daughter close. The custody battle between Cary Grant and Diane Cannon became one of Hollywood's most bitter and public divorces. What was supposed to be settled quietly in lawyers' offices became a front-page spectacle that exposed the dark side of Cary's obsessive love. Diane's allegations were shocking. She claimed that Cary was using LSD regularly, that he was paranoid and controlling, and that his obsession with Jennifer was unhealthy for the child. She painted a picture of a man so desperate to avoid abandonment that he was willing to destroy anyone who threatened his relationship with his daughter. Cary's response was swift and devastating. His legal team, the best money could buy, portrayed Diane as an unstable gold digger who was trying to exploit a devoted father. They highlighted his financial stability, his devotion to Jennifer, and his willingness to sacrifice his career for fatherhood. But the truth, as it often is, was more complicated than either side admitted. Cary genuinely loved Jennifer with an intensity that was both beautiful and terrifying. His childhood trauma had created a father who would do anything to protect his child, including things that might ultimately harm her. The final custody arrangement was unusual for the time. Jennifer would live primarily with Cary, but spend summers and holidays with Diane. The judge was swayed by Cary's financial resources and his apparent devotion, but also mandated regular psychological evaluations to ensure Jennifer's well-being. Now a toddler, this arrangement meant growing up in a world of incredible privilege but also intense scrutiny. Every playdate was supervised, every friendship analyzed, every experience filtered through her father's fears and expectations. Cary enrolled Jennifer in the most exclusive private schools in Los Angeles, but he couldn't resist interfering. Teachers reported that he would call multiple times a day to check on her progress, and he often appeared unannounced to observe classes or playground activities by the time Jennifer was 5 years old. She had a full-time bodyguard and lived behind multiple layers of security. Cary told himself this was necessary protection for the daughter of a famous man, but others worried he was creating a prison of love. Despite the unusual circumstances, Jennifer Grant's childhood was filled with extraordinary experiences that most people could only dream of. She traveled the world with her father, met legendary performers, and lived a life of incredible luxury. Cary took Jennifer everywhere to London to meet his mother, whom he'd finally rescued from the institution. to film festivals in Cannes, to exclusive resorts in the Caribbean. But these weren't typical family vacations. They were opportunities for Cary to have Jennifer all to himself, away from any outside influences. Jennifer grew up meeting icons like Grace Kelly, Jimmy Stewart, and Alfred Hitchcock, all of whom doted on her as Cary's precious daughter. But she also learned early that her father's fame came with a price: constant attention, endless questions, and the pressure of living up to an impossible legacy. Despite Cary's interference, Jennifer proved to be an intelligent and resilient child. Teachers noted that she was mature beyond her years, probably because she spent most of her time with adults. But they also observed a certain wariness, a careful way of speaking that suggested she'd learned to navigate complex adult emotions from a very young age. As Jennifer entered her teenage years, the tensions in her relationship with Cary began to surface. Like any adolescent, she wanted more independence, more privacy, more normal teenage experiences. But Cary saw every request for freedom as a potential abandonment. Dating was virtually impossible. Any boy who showed interest in Jennifer faced interrogation from private investigators hired by Cary. He justified this as protection. But Jennifer began to understand that her father's love came with conditions that were becoming harder to accept. When it came time for college, the battle lines were drawn. Jennifer wanted to attend school on the East Coast, to experience independence for the first time in her life. Cary wanted her to stay in California, close to home, where he could continue to monitor her safety and well-being. The compromise they reached would set the stage for the phase of their relationship and ultimately determine what would happen to Jennifer Grant. When her father was no longer there to protect her, Jennifer Grant eventually won the battle to attend Stanford University. But even this victory came with strings attached. Cary had donated heavily to the university and maintained connections with faculty members who would keep him informed about Jennifer's activities. For the first time in her life, Jennifer experienced something resembling normal teenage life. She made friends who didn't know or care about her father's fame, dated boys who hadn't been vetted by private investigators, and began to develop her own identity separate from being Cary Grant's daughter. But Cary struggled with every day of Jennifer's absence. He called constantly, sent care packages weekly, and found excuses to visit the campus regularly. Jennifer later admitted that she felt guilty about enjoying her independence, knowing how much her father was suffering. At Stanford, Jennifer began exploring her own artistic interests, including acting. She appeared in several student productions and discovered that she had inherited not just her father's looks, but also his talent for performance. When Jennifer told Cary about her acting interests, his reaction was complex. Part of him was proud that she'd inherited his gifts, but part of him was terrified. He'd spent decades trying to protect her from the harsh realities of Hollywood, and now she seemed drawn to the very world he'd tried to shield her from. Jennifer's graduation from Stanford in 1988 was both a celebration and a crisis point. At 22, she was ready to begin her adult life. But Cary, now 84, was facing his greatest fear, that his daughter no longer needed him. Cary's health was beginning to decline, though he tried to hide it from Jennifer. He suffered from arthritis, had heart problems, and was dealing with a depression that had haunted him his entire life. But his greatest fear wasn't death. It was that Jennifer would abandon him before he died. Jennifer faced an impossible choice. She could pursue her own dreams and risk her father's emotional collapse. Or she could sacrifice her independence to care for the man who had sacrificed everything for her. The decision she made would define the rest of their relationship and the rest of her life. Jennifer's decision was characteristic of the selfless love that had defined their relationship. She moved back to Los Angeles and into her father's Beverly Hills home, officially to help him manage his business affairs, but really to ensure he wouldn't spend his final years alone. The roles had reversed. Now Jennifer was the caretaker, monitoring Cary's health, managing his medications, and providing the constant companionship he'd always craved. Friends marveled at her devotion, especially given how controlling Cary had been throughout her childhood. During these years, Cary began sharing stories with Jennifer about his childhood, his fears, and his motivations as a father. For the first time, Jennifer began to understand the depth of trauma that had driven her father's obsessive love. Surprisingly, this period also saw a reconciliation between Cary and Diane Cannon. The custody battles were long over, and both parents could see that their shared focus, Jennifer's well-being, had created a remarkable young woman despite their conflicts. On November 29, 1986, Cary Grant suffered a massive stroke while preparing for a performance in Davenport, Iowa. He was 82 years old. Jennifer rushed to be with him, but he died before she could reach the hospital. At Cary's funeral, Jennifer delivered a eulogy that shocked everyone who heard it. Instead of the typical celebrity memorial, she spoke honestly about her father's struggles with depression, his fears of abandonment, and his overwhelming love for her. She painted a picture of a complex man who had been both the best and most difficult father imaginable. Cary left Jennifer virtually his entire estate, estimated at over $60 million. But more than money, he left her with a complex legacy, the knowledge that she had been the most important thing in the life of one of Hollywood's greatest stars. With her father gone, Jennifer Grant faced a question that had been postponed for 20 years. Who was she when she wasn't Cary Grant's daughter? Jennifer decided to pursue the acting career she'd put on hold. She appeared in several television shows and films, including Beverly Hills, 90210, and Friends. Critics noted her natural talent and striking resemblance to her father, but Jennifer was determined to succeed on her own merits. In 1993, Jennifer married director Randy Zisk, and they had 2 sons together. For Jennifer, motherhood offered a chance to break the cycle of obsessive parenting that had defined her own childhood. She was determined to give her children the normal childhood she'd never had. Unlike many children of celebrities, Jennifer actively avoided publicity. She rarely gave interviews, stayed away from Hollywood parties, and focused on building a private family life away from the cameras that had followed her since birth. In 2011, Jennifer published a memoir about her father called Good Stuff, a reminiscence of my father, Cary Grant. The book was both a love letter to her father and an honest examination of what it meant to grow up as the obsession of a Hollywood legend. Jennifer has also devoted herself to charitable causes, particularly those related to mental health and children's welfare issues that were deeply personal given her father's struggles and her own unusual childhood. So, whatever happened to Cary Grant's only daughter, Jennifer Grant became something her father never expected, a woman who learned to balance love and independence, who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone find their own way. Jennifer Grant lives quietly in Los Angeles, focused on her own family and her charitable work. She rarely speaks publicly about her father, but when she does, it's with a mixture of love, understanding, and hard-won wisdom about the complexities of family relationships. Her story reminds us that even the most devoted parents can love in ways that are both beautiful and suffocating, and that children of celebrities face unique challenges that the public rarely sees or understands. Jennifer Grant survived being the obsession of one of Hollywood's greatest stars. She learned to honor her father's memory while creating her own identity. And perhaps most importantly, she broke the cycle of fear and abandonment that had defined the Grant family for generations. What do you think about Jennifer Grant's story? Do you believe Cary Grant's obsessive love was protective or harmful? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to subscribe for more hidden stories from Hollywood's golden age. Until next time, remember that behind every legend is a human story, and sometimes those stories are more compelling than any movie ever made.